Oh, hey everybody. This episode, as it turns out, has a surprising amount of strawberry references in it. And I didn't have any strawberries, but I found a popsicle. That was as close as I could get. Anyway, theme song. Okay, everybody, claims. I'm pretty excited to talk about this. Claim. Some synonyms include main idea, your point, the single controlling idea, your thesis statement. Okay, these are things that English teachers have said, are saying, and will probably say forever that all mean the same thing. Your claim. Your claim is, to flash back to episode 1, your claim is that part of your worldview, that belief, that idea, that proposal that you might have, that you are trying to demonstrate as being valid and true. That is your claim. Now, in order to be a good claim, because you can write a pretty bad claim. I've been doing this for 20 years and I've seen a lot of bad claims. So to write a good claim, you have to do 3 things, or a good claim is 3 things. Let's put it that way. A good claim is debatable, clear, and narrow. Now, you might in your head have a perfectly good idea what all of those things mean when it comes to claim. If so, that's great. Skip ahead a couple minutes. The rest of you, I want to make sure that we have a common understanding of what makes for a good claim before we take a look at our mentor text, which is going to be our mentor text for this episode and the next 2. It's actually going to be the first link down below. It's an essay by a guy named Bryan Stevenson called A Presumption of Guilt. All right, and when we get to his claim, and we will get to his claim, I'm going to talk about how it is debatable, clear, and narrow. So here's what that means. Actually, I'm going to talk about what it doesn't mean, as well as what it means. So debatable does not mean a pure opinion. Like this guy who says, I like strawberries. Okay, fine. What do you want me to do with that? Do you want me to tell you that strawberries are gross? They're not gross. They're actually pretty good. But an opinion like that is not something you can debate. I mean, yeah, you can try to change somebody's mind, but it's not something that you want to make the centerpiece of an argument that you are writing. And debatable does not mean something you can't test. We all know Ancient Aliens guy, right? Is there any way to test that claim? No, there's not. There's no point in trying to make an argument that is completely unprovable and undisprovable, I guess. So you know what, we're gonna forget about Ancient Aliens guy and we're just gonna stick with strawberries. Because a debatable claim does make some statement of fact or put forward some proposal that reasonable people might be unsure about or might disagree with. For example, a good student, instead of writing, I like strawberries, a good student might write this. The average American eats more than 7 pounds of strawberries annually, which is too low. Probably not all at once though, right? I mean, unless it was some sort of eating contest like they do at the hot. Siri, find out if there's a strawberry eating contest. We'll come back to that. Clear. Clear does not mean a question. Such as, should we ban pesticides? Like, I don't know, bad student. You're the one who did all the research. You have to tell me whether we should be banning pesticides or not. Clear also doesn't mean that you say you know what the answer is, or you say you know what to do, or you say you've identified the theme without saying what the answer is, or what we should do, or what the theme is. You can't just say something like, what would that bad student say? I know what to do about pesticides and I will tell you. Now, I don't want you to tell me that you will tell me. I just want you to tell me. Okay? If you know what to do about pesticides, then write that down. Clear does mean a fairly short, or at least comparatively short, and we'll talk about that when we get to our mentor text, but a short, unambiguous, cannot be misinterpreted statement of your belief, or statement of your proposal, or statement of fact that you are trying to explain. Our good student would probably say, we should ban pesticides on strawberries. Okay, you see it's short, it is clear, there's no way to misinterpret it. It is an excellent claim. Now, whether or not it can be proven to, somebody's satisfaction that they would actually stop using pesticides on strawberries, that remains to be seen. But as a claim, we can certainly see that it is debatable and it is clear. Finally, that brings us to narrow. Narrow is not making a statement so broad that there is no possible way anybody could disagree with you, such as what our bad student over here is saying, that people should eat food, not pesticides. Well, of course, right? Let's all get out of the way, everybody, while people stampede to the other side of that argument. Yeah, it's not happening, okay? Narrow is also not something so big that you can't adequately prove it within the space that you have. Something like, we should ban all pesticides everywhere. Now, if you want to sit down and write a book or a series of books, be my guest. But if you have a couple of pages or 700 words or, even a 2,000 word research paper, you're probably going to have a hard time proving something that big. On the other hand, let's look at what something narrow might actually be. Good student. We should ban pesticides on strawberries. Oh, you know what? We've already heard that claim. So writing a claim that is debatable and clear probably also means it's going to be narrow. In fact, if you are just focusing on any two of those three, you write a narrow, clear thesis, it's probably going to be debatable. Or a narrow, debatable thesis, it'll be clear. Can help you get to where you're going, which is hopefully a good claim. Okay, so now it's time to look at our mentor text. Again, it's going to be the first link below in the description. You click on it, it takes you to Bryan Stevenson's essay, A Presumption of Guilt. It's about the legacy of lynching in this country's history and how that legacy still resonates today in the criminal justice system, at least as it regards race. He opens, and this is one of the things I talked about in my episode about opening paragraphs, he opens with a personal story. You might call it an anecdote, except the connotation of anecdote is that it's lighthearted and funny. This is not. This is Bryan Stevenson, the author, being threatened by a police officer. He feels in danger for his life. He's done nothing wrong. The police officer has a gun on him. And at the end of that little narrative, he gets to his claim. And you'll notice, if you're following along at home, you'll notice that his opening section is 5 paragraphs. This is no 5-paragraph persuasive essay. This is something much more interesting, much more well-structured. But at the end of that opening section, he gives us this thesis. As a consequence of this country's failure to address effectively its legacy of racial inequality, this presumption of guilt and the history that created it have significantly shaped every institution in American society, especially our criminal justice system. And I want to talk about this claim, and I want to talk about how this claim is debatable, clear, and narrow. It's debatable because there are several places in here where Stevenson says something that a reasonable person might disagree with. Stevenson obviously believes these things, but let's take a look at a couple of them. Okay, this country has failed to address effectively its legacy of racial inequality. There are people out there who believe that America has put the race question to bed, that we have effectively dealt with the history of racial inequality that we've had in this country. We elected Barack Obama. Racism is over, they might say. Stevenson disagrees, and he's going to provide evidence as we go through this. And in episode 2, we'll look at his evidence. He's going to provide evidence why that is not true. He also says this: the presumption of guilt has significantly shaped every institution in American society, especially our criminal justice system. It is very clear, then, what it is that he wants to talk about, which is the criminal justice system in particular. And by saying, especially the criminal justice system, he works to narrow his claim, which, if you read the phrase before that, every institution in American society, could start to feel overbroad. But what he's going to do is use the criminal justice system to illustrate how racism and America's racist history still pervades everywhere. There is nowhere you can go in America where you don't see a legacy of racism. So that's his claim. It is debatable, it is clear, and it is narrow. So before we go, I want to talk about two more things, terms your English teachers may or may not have used. I don't know. I wasn't there unless I am your teacher, in which case I have used these terms. I want to talk about qualifiers, and I want to talk about counterclaims. A qualifier is sometimes people who have an agenda, they might call it a weasel word. In fact, sometimes you might hear somebody else using a qualifier and think that it's a weasel word, that they're trying to get out of something. But basically, a qualifier is an admission that not every issue is black and white. Not every issue is 0% or 100%. Let's take a look at Stevenson's claim again. Okay, he uses the word effectively. He uses the word significantly. He doesn't say completely, he says significantly. It has made a difference. It has had an impact, and that impact is significant. But he leaves enough room in there that somebody could say, oh, I thought you were going to say 100%, and well, now that you're not making such a black and white claim, maybe we should think about it. Or if you want to go back to our good student writing about strawberries, she would say this: evidence suggests we should ban pesticides on strawberries. Okay, so going from that blanket, we should ban pesticides on strawberries, which is a perfectly reasonable claim. I mean, it is debatable, it is clear, it is narrow. But when she adds evidence suggests that we should, she is giving herself a little bit of room to be disagreed with. And she's not going to immediately turn off her critics. It does mean that she has to provide that evidence in order to prove what she's saying. But using a qualifier it's an acknowledgement that the world isn't always one way or the other, that sometimes there's an in-between. Related to that, there's this idea of counterclaims. Sometimes you might hear the word concession. A counterclaim goes against your claim, just like a counterstrike goes against a strike, or a countermeasure goes against a measure, or a counterbalance goes against a balance, or a countertop goes against a top. Wait. Okay, forget about the last one. But when you include some of those counter arguments in your writing, it's a way for you to say, I have read the other side. I have heard the other side. This is what they say. And while you're doing that, you may find that the other side makes some good points. And you want to acknowledge those points and say, props to you, other side, you're right about this. That's the concession. It is important, though, that you take those counter arguments and you take those concessions and you provide something additional of your own, so that you're not just undermining your essay and leaving it there. You're saying, you know what, the other side has a point, but let me tell you why that point is less important. To go back to our good student writing about strawberries, she could say something like this: While some strawberries may be lost to pest-inflicted damage, the improved safety of the remaining strawberries will allow for increased sales. So what she does there, she says, hey, opponents, props, you are right that if we stop using pesticides, the pests are going to get some of the strawberries. But she turns that into a positive, where she says you can still say that your remaining strawberries are safer, they don't have this pesticide stuff on them, and then people will buy more of them. And that's good. I think most people would want to sell more of the things that they are selling. Bryan Stevenson does it too in his text, and I encourage you to read the whole thing. But he does sort of acknowledge that the other side has made some reasonable arguments. He talks about, for example, in the 1970s when the Supreme Court outlawed capital punishment executions, but then a couple of years later reinstated capital punishment. He talks about how one of the primary reasons why the court reinstated capital punishment is that the court didn't want a bunch of angry white mobs breaking into prisons and kidnapping black convicts or just black defendants and lynching them themselves. That it would be safer and better for the state to do the killing than to tempt white people into lynching again. White people are the worst. Sorry. It's true. So next time we will talk about evidence. I hope this episode has given you some clarity on what a claim is and how to write one that is debatable, clear, and narrow. And as I said, please read all of Stevenson's text. We will be talking about his evidence when I see you for the next one. For example, our bad student might say, what's he say? Oh, people should eat food, not pesticides. No duh. Okay, that was bad. I can't no duh.